Спасибо большое. Я очень рада сегодня, потому что я жила в Таджикистане 5 лет назад. Мой русский это очень плохо, но стараюсь. I will have this presentation in English, but I hope that the simultaneous translation will do it justice. I thank you all for this invitation to Sana. Very much grateful to be here. I know I only have 20 minutes, so I might move quite quickly, but I will be available afterwards for any questions. So without further ado, today I am here to make a case for social-emotional learning around the globe and for our future. There we go. Just a quick agenda for what I'm going to be speaking about today. We're going to start with a look at this global public health crisis that among youth and the importance of focusing on youth development. We're then going to talk a little bit about social-emotional learning and the work of CASEL and what we have discovered about its impact around the world. Talk a little bit about the results, how we scale up, and then how we here in Kazakhstan can get started and think about predicting some important outcomes that can emerge from this important work. Okay. So before I begin, what I'd like you to do is I'd like everyone to close your eyes and think for a moment of one child whom you know. A child whom you know well. Just focus on that one child. It's a school-aged child, somewhere between the age of 5 and 18. And once you have that child in your mind, I'd like you to open your eyes and I'd like you to reflect and answer some of the following questions. And you're going to answer as follows. Да, нет, иногда. Да, нет, иногда. Я не знаю. Okay? And you're just going to answer in your mind. You don't need to share this with anybody. This child that you're thinking about, does he or she like school? Just answer in your mind. Да, нет, иногда, я не знаю. Can this child take the perspective of other people, particularly of those whose opinions might be different from their own? Да, нет, иногда, я не знаю. Does this child able to self-regulate their actions during times of stress? Is this child looking forward to a positive future for themselves? Okay. There are many more questions that I could ask. But if you answered нет, иногда, or я не знаю, thank you for your honesty, because you've come to the right place. If you answered yes to all of those questions, I ask you, how do you know? What has this child told you that makes you feel confident? Okay? So just keep that in the back of your mind. And the follow-up question to that is, then why do we have a global public health crisis among many of our youth? Let's talk about some global statistics here. Bullying. If you look at the statistics, fortunately in Kazakhstan, it is not a high-risk concern. It is a low-risk concern if you see yourselves on the map. Canada, is where I'm from, is highly regarded for being a place that values diversity, where we are peacekeepers, where our social competence is highly regarded. And yet, in our schools, bullying is some of the highest. We have some of the highest rates of bullying in the world. So there's something concerning there. Let's take a look at anxiety. Here are some global statistics on anxiety. Take a look at the pattern that you see. Similar to depression, take a look at the pattern. What do you notice? Higher among girls than boys. So what do we need to think about when we're thinking about teaching our young girls? Where should we focus our attention? Now let's take a look at suicide. This is where we start to look inward, because we know that we have some of the highest suicide rates here. According to this child suicide report in Kazakhstan, a special report that was done by UNICEF, I think just a few years ago, one thing that they found was that 80% of those who have committed suicide in this country are between the ages of 18 and 29. So what is happening among school-aged children that is precipitating this effect? Okay? And these aren't happening among girls. The majority are boys. So we need to start thinking about boys and girls in our schools and what we need to do for them in order to combat these concerns. It is easier to build up a child than it is to repair an adult. It is easier to build up a child than it is to repair an adult. But how? So what is social and emotional learning? This is the how. In 1994, a group of researchers in the United States developed a collaborative for academic and social emotional learning. They looked at a number of programs and schools that simply were not doing well in supporting the kids' social and emotional development. So they decided that they were going to start and take a systematic approach to combating some of these issues. They did a review of the literature, and what they found in these studies was that there were 5 distinct categories of skills that would support these children's academic performance as well as life skills. These skills, these 5 different categories, let's talk briefly about them. The first one is self-awareness. I asked you at the beginning to think about that one child. So I ask you again, self-awareness. Is this child that you were thinking about, do they know their own strengths, talents, and difficulties? Are they aware of their emotions when they're feeling them? Are they able to express them? How about self-management? Is he or she able to manage their emotions in times of stress? To what extent are they able to do this? Responsible decision making. Are they able to make responsible decisions, both at school and in life, at home and in the community? Relationship skills. Are they able to initiate and maintain strong friendships? Are they able to negotiate conflict effectively in their relationships? And social awareness. Are they able to read social cues, take the perspective of others, particularly those who may be different from them or have different opinions or backgrounds from them? These are the 5 skills that are very important in order to support our kids in building a positive future for themselves and to do well in school and in life. Okay. Does social and emotional learning work? So there was a very robust study that was conducted by a research team at CASEL, And what they found was that it does. They looked at, and I'm just going to flip the slide here, they did what's called a meta-analysis, which means they looked at a series of 213 studies which involved programs that were implemented, SEL programs that were implemented in classrooms involving 270,000 students. And they wanted to take a look at what the results showed. And what they found was improved classroom behavior, improved ability to manage stress, improved ability to manage depression, improved attitudes about themselves, improved attitudes about, improved attitudes about others, and improved attitudes about school. Now here's what I found most interesting. They looked at studies where classroom teachers implemented the programs, and they also looked at studies in which experts or external consultants came in to implement these programs. And guess where the greater results were? Classroom teachers. Not the consultants or the external specialists that came in. The highest academic gains came from classroom teachers implementing these social-emotional learning programs. That's something that we need to keep in mind. It also helps us because it's very practical to have classroom teachers of our own implement programs. Okay? So that's very promising. More evidence. There was a great study that was done by the Center for Benefit Cost Studies in Education by some researchers at Columbia Teachers College. And what they found was that for every $1 spent on social-emotional education, there is a return of $11. For every $1 we spend, there is a return of $11. We can take one quick example. They looked at several evidence-based programs. Evidence-based meaning that these programs had shown to have very positive results. So let's look at one of these programs called the Life Skills Training Program. This program was targeted for a particular group of students who were at risk of delinquency and violence and drug abuse, substance abuse. And by implementing this program, what they did was they examined the costs of the program, which was $13,000 over 3 years for 100 kids. Okay, so that's $130 per student. So $13,000 was the cost of the material resources, the human resource, the time. Then they looked at the benefits. Okay? And the benefits they looked at were short-term, happening concurrently with the program, long-term, over the time that they were attending school up until graduation, and then also factored in the adult benefits when they become older. So for example, looking at career criminal probability. What is the likelihood that these young people would become criminals? And what are the benefits of implementing this program in order to reduce that? Okay. Substance abuse reduction, delinquency reduction. And what they found is by implementing a program that costs $13,000, the net and factoring in then the benefits, short-term and long-term, the value of that program is $279,000. $279,000. By investing just $13,000. Now I want to say that a social-emotional learning program does not have to cost. It comes from the relationship between teachers and students. It comes from the way that we teach our kids. It's not about flying in a program or flying in a consultant. It's integrated in the way we teach. Okay? And that we can discuss a little bit later. So knowing that we have a good evidence base, CASEL decided, all right, let's systematically implement these programs in schools. So they started at the district level. This is where it all started in 2011. 2012 and 13, more came on board. And in 2017, this is how many states have implemented it, because it's showing to work. In Canada, where I am, this is where it started. In British Columbia, which is the province in which I live, we have systematically integrated social-emotional learning into every single school. It is mandated. The province of British Columbia has mandated the implementation of social-emotional learning in schools. We'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. There were 5 forces of change, and I'd like you to think about these 5 forces of change as you think that it applies to your context here in Kazakhstan, because every country is different. But the 5 forces of change are really important. The first one was a policy change. Knowing that we were struggling, knowing that we had children who were at risk, that schools were not doing a good enough job of promoting the social-emotional development of our kids, our province came up with a policy change. That is very important because it makes everybody on the same page. Teacher preparation. We cannot expect our teachers to go into classrooms and magically integrate social-emotional learning into their classroom practice. They need skills, they need knowledge, they need training. So it is now integrated into our teacher preparation programs at the university level. Assessment. We have what is called performance standards for social-emotional learning. We call them social responsibility standards. And we evaluate to what extent our children are meeting the expectations of social responsibility in our schools. But we also measure the impact as well of these programs. The science of SEL. This is very important. There are a lot of organizations that are well-intentioned that are implementing social-emotional learning, but unless your program or unless your strategies that you use are evidence-based, we are wasting our time. This is no time for experimentation. We want to know that whatever it is that we are integrating into our schools has been shown to work. Okay? And it is happening in classrooms by classroom teachers. Okay? So these are the 5 forces of change that we can think about here and where the starting point could be. So from North America to around the globe, this is what it looks like. Okay? Places in Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and Asia. All of these places have implemented social-emotional learning. And it's still growing. The OECD has come up with a framework, and social-emotional learning has been implemented in various countries around the world. I know that just last fall there was a meeting, I think in Paris, where those countries' representatives who had implemented social-emotional learning in their educational programming all got together and shared their own frameworks for social-emotional learning. Because like I said, it's not one size fits all. We have to look at our own context and see what makes sense. And 29 countries were involved, and I'm happy to share with Sana or anybody else what these frameworks look like so that you are able to create your own. Okay? So it's time to go forward. You don't have to have it all figured out to move forward. Okay? You'll be waiting forever. So what do we need to think about? The first thing is to ensure that you have the combined efforts of stakeholders. You cannot do this alone. Schools cannot do this alone. They need support from policymakers, educators, parents, researchers, non-government organizations, government, global organizations, and students. The voices of students are very important. They matter. They will tell you what they need. Okay? So all of these representatives sitting around the table, this is what it takes. So it's a complex ecosystem that supports social-emotional learning. It's basically infused in every pore of the education system. Okay? The child, through the community, and through various institutions. So as you get started, this change process in support of social-emotional learning, the first step is to think of an agenda. What is your SEL policy agenda? What are the priorities for you? The second is you need to analyze. You need to analyze what are the specific priority youth problems that you face in this country, and what are the social-emotional learning solutions. You need to formulate a plan. Formulate a plan under a centralized system. If everybody is doing something different, it's going to be difficult to make it work, because the left hand isn't talking to the right hand. And you want to move together as a society and as a unit. Implement standards. Implement programs. Okay? And review. As you move along, review your policies, select your indicators, and evaluate how well you're doing, and then move on to the next step. What are your potential outcomes? Your academic achievement will improve. The academic achievement of these kids will improve. Why? Because they're going to be more motivated to achieve. Public health. The reduction of public health concerns, anxiety, depression, suicide, substance abuse, delinquency, school dropout. Economic development. Okay? And civil society. So in conclusion, invest in research. It's very important for us to hear the voices of our youth in telling us what it is that they need. This happens through research. Partner with your government and civil society organizations. Today was a starting point. Train your educational professionals. They are going to be at the front lines. Consult, consult, consult. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. No one person has the answers, but together you will find them. Involve families. Involve families. They will tell you what they need. They will tell you what their children have told them that they need. You are doing this for families. And invite your students to join the conversation, because ultimately you're doing it for them. We don't speak for them. We need to speak to them. And promote buy-in. If people are not buying in, it's not going to work. And I would say start small. Start small. 1 school, 2 schools. Test it out. If it's working, 3 schools, 5 schools, 10 schools, and so on. And start with the schools that want it, because that's where you're going to get your success. And lead with the heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Зухра. Можно будет еще, наверное, такой короткий один вопрос. Я думаю, Зухра очень объемно рассказала о их международном опыте, но хотелось бы спросить. Just one question for you, if you. Насколько долго? How long could it take? Okay, Russian is better. Okay. Насколько долго может занять процесс? Насколько долго может занять процесс интеграции, скажем так, вот, методики CASEL, скажем, даже вот в рамках одной школы? И какие бы вы порекомендовали, вот среди нас есть директора школ, педагоги, психологи, какие первые 3 действия вы могли бы порекомендовать для них, чтобы начать работать с CASEL?
So I think my first message is to start small. I think the first thing you need to do is identify what the priority concerns are at that school, because each school might be different, okay? So that's the first step, is start small. Your priority concern might be children are dropping out at a higher rate at this school than another school. Your priority concern might be that children are late too often at school. Your priority concern might be bullying. Identify what your priority concern is and do not try to address everything at the same time. Okay? Keep it manageable, keep it small. You may even find that the priority concern is at a particular grade level. Maybe it's 11th and 12th graders who are just about to graduate from high school. Maybe it's 1st and 2nd graders who have just started school. So keep it small and identify where those concerns are, and then start from there. And then you can always expand from there. Once you've identified the concerns, that's when you start to think, okay, now what are the strategies that we can employ? And then identify those strategies and implement those strategies. Collect data. Collect information that's going to tell you whether or not those strategies are working. And if they are working, keep going. If they're not working, dump them right away and select other strategies. But along the way, you want to consult and you want to collaborate.
Thank you.